Hey YouTube, long time no see. I know it's been a while since I posted one of my crazy stories, so I thought it was high time that I record something. I thought I'd share a little story I remembered from back in my college days, back when I was in my early 20s. Back around 2001, I went to UAB, University of Alabama at Birmingham, for those of you who aren't from around here. And I worked for their bookstore, the Blazer bookstore. I did deliveries for the supply department and the book department, delivering textbooks and other things like lab coats and stethoscopes, doctor supplies, to all the buildings and even the hospital there. I got to get out and drive the van and just be my own boss out there, and it was a pretty good job. And there were a lot of stories I picked up along the way, a lot of adventures. I had a great team that I worked with in the supply department at the bookstore, and we always used to joke around and tell stories. And one time they sent me on a little adventure without telling me where I was going. They sent me to the Volker Hall building there, down to the bottom floor. I took the book order and went downstairs there at Volker Hall, walked into a large room. The stench was just overwhelming. And when I walked into the back room, I found myself face to face with these shelves stacked with long black bags. At first I didn't realize what it was until I turned around and found myself staring face to face at a cadaver sitting up on a table. Well, I about fainted until the teacher came in and explained that I was in the anatomy department. Of course, when I got back to the bookstore, let me tell you, there was some HE double hockey stick to pay that day when I got back. Of course, they had a good laugh out of that, but one of my favorite stories there passed down. I don't know if this was true, but it's a pretty funny story to tell. Well, kind of spooky too, but there was a nurse who worked there at UAB, and she, of course, studied there and was working for a doctor on the night shift. And this was in the tall building there, the Jefferson Tower building. She was a very good nurse. She was always on time. She was very good to her patients. And the head nurse, Miss Ankers, had her eye on little Melony, the young nurse. One night she pulled Melony aside and said, "You know, I'm really impressed with your work here, so I thought I would assign you to a very special project. But you're going to need to follow me tonight at the end of your shift, and I need to take you downstairs and show you what it is." Well, Melony was pretty excited. She was happy that she had done such a good job that Nurse Ankers would trust her to take on such a new and apparently secretive task. Well, that night at the end of her shift, Nurse Ankers took little Melony down on the elevator, down, past the second floor, first floor, basement, down to a floor that Melony didn't even know was there. The doors parted, and Melony was welcomed by a long, dark hallway. Nurse Ankers led her into the hallway, down what seemed to be an eternal path to the end of the hallway. Very little dim light there, and she took her around the corner to a room with a steel door. Pulling out a large key, she unlocked it and swung the metal door open, beckoning Melony in, but then she stopped her. "Before I turn the light on, Melony, there's something important that you need to know. What you're about to see, you cannot tell anyone. It does not go outside this floor. This is top secret. It's a very important experiment. Do not share this with anyone. Do you hear me?" Melony was taken aback, but said, "Yes, Nurse Ankers. Yes, of course." "All right then, Melony. What you're about to see might be a little disturbing, but it's very important that you keep it quiet." Well, Melony was a little bit shaken by this, and so she followed Miss Ankers into the room. There were a lot of machines stacked up there, wires leading out, and toward the center of the room was a table. There were all sorts of buzzing sounds and weird smells coming from the room, lights flashing on the machinery. And there on the table in the middle of the room, bundled up under a sheet, lay a very old man. Melony took a few steps forward and looked at him to see if he was awake. Of course, his eyes were shut. But as she looked closer, the familiarity of his face sent shockwaves up her spine. She turned to Nurse Anchors. "This is impossible. This is impossible, nurse. That this man, he's been dead for centuries. It's impossible that this man is here." Nurse Anchors just stared at her with her eyes bulging out. "Yes, Melony, I'm afraid it is true. That is Abraham Lincoln on that table." Melony looked closer and couldn't believe it. But he was shot. He was killed. "Melony, this is a very top secret. You cannot tell a living soul. If you do, there'll be hell to pay." Melony was taken aback, but she said, "Nurse Anchors, I assure you I won't breathe a word." So she explained to Melony, "Each night you need to come down here and check on him, look at the machines, make sure he's okay. If you see anything out of the ordinary, just call me and let me know. But one thing you must never, ever do, don't touch him. Do not touch him. Do you hear me, Melony?" "Yeah, yes, ma'am. Yes, Nurse Anchors. I won't touch him, I promise." "All right, then. Follow me back out." So Nurse Anchors took Melony out. But before leaving the floor there, she gave Melony a copy of the large key. "Keep this to yourself. Remember, you'll be in very nasty trouble if any word gets out, and I'll know it was you." So each night Melony did as she was instructed. Good nurse that she was. She went down to the bottom basement floor every night and checked on the old man to make sure he was okay, that the machineries seemed to be working as they should. But each night she wondered more and more. Why did she tell me not to touch him? What would that do? Well, curiosity killed the cat, as the old saying goes. So one night, Melony was checking on the old man, and her curiosity just overwhelmed her. Why don't they want me to touch this man? What's the big deal if I touch him? Stepping toward him, she noticed his eyes were closed, as they always were. He was never awake. He was always just seemingly dead to the world there, except for the heart rate machine, letting her know that he was still alive, as well as the shallow, ragged breathing. She looked at him closer and thought, I can't help it. It's just the human part of me. I'm only human. I have to know why they won't let me touch him. Why can't I touch him? So she tried her best to muster up enough self-control, but she just couldn't do it. So she reached forward with her hand, and ever so slowly, ever so gently, touched him on the shoulder. She stepped back and watched. For a moment, nothing happened. The same bloop, 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 bloop. Suddenly the breathing grew quiet. The eyes fluttered open. Boom! The old man sat up, his blanket falling away. He turned, blinking, and looked at Melony. Reaching up and pulling out wires from his body, a snarl crawled across his face. He started laughing. Yanking all the wires out and throwing back the cover, he leaped off the table. Melony jumped back. She turned, looking for the door, and tried to go for it. But like an inhuman flash, the old man darted in front of her. Suddenly he was there, blocking her from the door. Melony scrambled across the room, shoving the table out of her way. The old man hot on her heels, chasing her. She ran around the room, shoving machinery away as she tried to get away from him. Pushing her way through, she started screaming, "Help me!" Screaming, knowing that no one could hear her down on that bottom floor. She finally made her way to the door, getting away from the old man, and flung it open, racing out into the hallway. She ran and ran, footfalls coming behind her as the old man came fast on her heels. He was hundreds of years old, but somehow, some inhuman way, he was able to keep up speed behind her, reaching toward her with his hands, his fingertips just inches from her. She ran and ran, screaming toward the elevator. The doors were open until she got just to them, and they closed. "No!" she screamed, racing toward them, but they closed before she could get there, and the elevator left. She slammed her hand on the button, but it was no use. That old man was just feet behind her, and she knew she had to get away. So she ran another direction, down another hallway, trying doors, rattling them. Behind her, the footfalls continued. He kept on her. She raced and raced, rattling the doorknobs, trying every one, but nothing worked. Finally, she found a door that was unlocked and flung it open. She raced inside. The room was bare, nothing to hide her. All she could do was fling herself into the far corner as the old man stood in the doorway, blocking her from any further escape. He was breathing heavily as he stepped through the door and made his way across the room. Melony cringed in the corner, slid down and drew her knees up in front of her and hugged her knees and prayed and pleaded, "Please don't hurt me, please." The old man made his way to her until he got right on her and he knelt down. He stared at her, drool running from his mouth. He reached forward with his hand, and he reached. Melony squinched her eyes closed. "Oh no, please, please." His hand came toward her, closer, 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 until he tapped her on the shoulder. All was quiet. Melony opened her eyes and looked at the old man just inches from her face. And he smiled. "Tag! Now you're it."